So today I'm at the Biblical Hebrew class on the Hebrew Doc website, and we did chapter 4. It's taken us longer than we thought to just plod through some of these chapters, and that's okay. We will take as long as we want. I wanted to show you the new vocabulary for these. So chapter 5 vocabulary is here on flashcards, although I forgot that they're going to be, if I make it like this, maybe you can see them. Can you see them? Or is it too faint? All right, so this word is the word for father, and the word is of. Of is father. Some of you may know the word Abba, which actually means daddy, and you never see the word Abba in the Torah. You're only going to see the word of, which is father. So that's of, and that's father. And then we have the word El, and El is, and anybody who wants to talk, I'm muting everybody else except me, and you can raise your hand or chat or something if you need to say anything. El, it means to or toward. And I want you to be careful about the fact that you may recognize that there's a word El that has just these two dots with it that means God. And it's the same spelling. And one means God and one is a participle. And so it's surprising to see these. I mean, a preposition, not a participle, it's a preposition. But yeah, go ahead.
So both words are spelled the same way. It's just
the vowels
underneath.
The vowels may be different, although I can't promise that 100% of the time. But most of the time the vowels will be different. But you will definitely be able to tell in context. And if not, then we go back to the principle of the Torah is gloriously ambiguous. That you can't tell the difference about whether something is going to or toward something else, or if we're talking about God. If you can't tell the difference between that, then there's something very ambiguous about that sentence, and it takes a little bit of then. So we have of and El so far, the two words that we have here, and El, remember, is to or toward, and it is a separated preposition. It is not prefixed to the word, and I'll show you what that means in just a little bit. This word is connected to a word that we've already seen. So you may remember, and I'm going to try to draw for you a little bit. You remember the word where we have an aleph and a dot, the yud dot, the e dot, and then you have a yud, and then we have a shin. And this word was part of our vocabulary from chapter 4, ish. And I would say it means ish is man. That's a joke. But ish is man and isha is woman. And you'll notice that isha does not have a yud between the aleph and the shin. And you'll notice that it has, and there's this cool midrash that I like to show. And that is, if I took this word, if I took the word, I'm going to put it up here, aleph and a shin, and forgive the fact that I'm drawing right through that line. It's irrelevant to this part. If I take this word ish, which is not one of our vocabulary words, but if I take the word ish, which means a flame or a fire, ish, and a flame or a fire is sometimes symbolic of enlightenment, about the spark that's in you, that your life is lit up when you learn things, or you know things, or knowledge, or enlightenment. So if I take the word ish, which means fire or flame, and if I add a letter of God here, which in this case for man is the yud, which is one of the letters in God's name. If I add that yud, I take ish, I add a yud in the middle, one of God's letters, and I go from flame, enlightenment, to man. And if I take instead, and I take the word ish, and I add the hey at the end, which is another one of the letters in God's name. So I'm either taking ish and adding yud in the middle, or I'm taking ish and adding a hey at the end. And either way, once I take this flame of enlightenment and I add God, a spark of God to it, it becomes man or woman. I think that's cool. That's a midrash, that's a story. But the word we need to know today is, we already had ish from last week, and now we have isha, isha. And it's not surprising then, isha, if ish is a man, I add to the end of it, and I'm going to get woman. Isha. We're going to talk about feminine nouns as part of today's lesson, but today we just have woman here, isha. This word, behema, behema, accents on the last syllable, which is typical. Isha, by the way, accents on the last syllable, behema. So behema is usually cattle. It could potentially mean a generic animal. It's usually a cow, behema, it's a cow. And for some reason, this book seems to use it a lot to mean like a monster kind of an animal. Don't ask me why, but it's cow. And in Yiddish, it's not uncommon for people to say, that woman, what a behema, which is a big, fat, ugly woman. Not a nice word to say. And if you called a woman a behema, then just watch, and it'll be a self-fulfilling prophecy. She should show you what it counts. Anyway, behema and isha both end in a. That's going to be a hint to something that's about to happen. Then we have this word, which is bat, bat. We already saw the word ben, which means son, and this word is bat, which means daughter. You may have heard of a bat mitzvah. Bat mitzvah means daughter of the commandment, bat. And then we have the word he. This is one of those things that feels like who's on first. And in fact, if you come here, you should still see this. Can you still see this? Can you see a new page? We're back to the biblical Hebrew page. So if you come here, it says Hebrew humor, who's on first, underneath the blue box here. And it's going to do a whole who's on first routine because of this specific word. So he in Hebrew is she in English. So she in English is he in Hebrew, and he in English is who in Hebrew. Yeah.
Last week when you mentioned it, or the week before, I ended up going to YouTube after class and watched the video between a father and his daughter doing this. It was absolutely hilarious.
So
I didn't understand half of it, but it was just absolutely hilarious.
Well, hopefully soon we can understand it. We'll look at that one, because that exactly is what's going on here. Is that if I could write it, I could show it to you this way. If I do this and I say that she in English, if I can write these, I hate writing with a mouse. She in English is he in Hebrew. That's hey, and a yud, and an aleph. And I shouldn't have made it with the fat letters. And then he, which is he. And he in English is who in Hebrew, which also sounds like an English word. And who in English, which is where it gives us the idea to say who's on first, but who in English is me, who me. So if that doesn't lend to an Abbott and Costello kind of a thing, I don't know what does, because it's she, he, who, me. And so, yes, of course it will. And we'll take a look at that afterwards. If we're all good, then we'll take a look at it and we'll fix this. But right now, the important thing is knowing that he means she, okay? We already saw who meant he. And then we come back to this side. And we already learned some verbs, so you can tell that this is a verb because it's got 3 root letters, and the first one has this vowel under it, and the second letter has this under it. We call that the yay verb form. So we have halach. Halach means he walked or he went. So halach is he walked or he went. I want to point out something important here, and we'll see it in a minute. This has a final chaf at the end of the word. It is a verb form, and verb forms are not going to keep that final chaf at the end of the word forever. It's going to be in the middle, and when it goes to the middle, then that final chaf is going to turn into a regular chaf if we're adding other things to it. So just be warned that you don't want to remember a word by remembering this shape, that it's specifically a final letter. You want to remember the word by remembering that it's a hey and a lamed and a chaf, and it doesn't matter if it's in the final shape or not, except for the fact that obviously if it is in the final form, in the final place in the word, then it's going to be a final letter shape. And if it's not at the final place, then it's not going to be a final letter shape, but it's the chaf itself that matters. And then we have this word, which is, it's got a couple of weird things going on. This is one of the longest words that you've had to learn. It says Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim, I guess you can guess what it means. It means Jerusalem, Yerushalayim. But there's a cool anomaly in this word that they kept. If I were writing this word in modern Hebrew, I would put a yud over here. And I wouldn't put a dot under that final letter. I would put a dot, the one dot for E underneath the yud. And it would say Yerusha. And this says la here, but this doesn't say im. That doesn't exist at all. You're never going to see this except right here for this word. And the reason why they did that, why they put an E dot under that final mem, is because throughout the millennia, people would pronounce this word as Yerushalayim. At some point, that became the only way of saying that name. And obviously, because of the consonants that are here, possibly, and this is why they think that they may know one of the reasons why this city got its name, is that possibly it may have been Yerushalem, and it may not have been Yerushalayim, but because all throughout the Torah, it's spelled without an ayim option. It looks like it might have been Yerushalem. They spell it like this with that E dot under the mem because nobody pronounces it any way other than Yerushalayim. And so if you're going to say it that way, then the vowel is going to go there. And we didn't come up with it. The Masoretes did a few hundred years ago. The Masoretes plopped it there when they invented the vowels altogether. So for as long as we can remember, this has been pronounced Yerushalayim. And even though there aren't enough consonants to reflect that in the biblical spelling of the word, that's how it's going to be spelled. And that's how it's going to be said. Yerushalayim. Okay. And then we continue. This word is min. Min means from or than. And I say from or than because you're going to see soon that it's a way of showing a comparison. I could say something's bigger than, but if I could say you're from Jerusalem, and I could say min Yerushalayim, or, I came from Shreveport, and I could say min Shreveport. So we're going to keep that like that for now, min. And then here's another place name. And you notice that Yerushalayim ended with an ayim ending. And remember, anytime it has an ah-yeh sound in it, the accent's always going to be in the ah. And this word is Mitzrayim, which is an appropriate place for us to be talking about today, which is only a week and a half away from Passover, because in real time, we are still stuck in Mitzrayim. We're still stuck in Egypt. Mitzrayim means Egypt. Some people say that it comes from the word tsar, which means narrow, which might have been narrow-minded people or a narrow place or something. But Mitzrayim is the way you say Egypt. Yerushalayim is the way you say Jerusalem. And Mitzrayim is the way you say Egypt. And there are more words. Hold on, moving over to here. I love this word. This word is mishpacha. Mishpacha means family. It's one of the words that is a common word in Yiddish, only you hear it say mishpacha. You say the whole mishpacha came to the Seder. So you say mishpacha is the Hebrew word for family. And once we've gotten to the word mishpacha, we'll have enough vowels for me to be able to teach you the rules about spelling. I kept saying you'll know when you're older. We may not get to that today, but it's something that we can finally do now that we have some of these words with this many syllables in it and things. This word, we had na'ar, which is a young guy. And we now have na'ara, where you're adding ah to the end of the word, and it becomes a young woman, na'ara. Accents on the last syllable. There's a composite vowel here. You're just going to have to live with that. It's going to sound just like the ah. and ah and ah. These are all ahs, 3 different vowels, but they all sound like ah, na'ara. We're going back to this side. This is a person's name. Her name is Ruth, Ruth, which in English is usually spelled R-U-T-H, because in some transcriptions, when they try to transliterate a tav without a digation in it, the consonant is attached at the top, the tail or toe at the bottom left. Sometimes they would transliterate it with a th sound. So for example, you will see places like Beth El. There's no th anymore in modern Hebrew, but it used to be that the tav without a dagesh might have been a th in some places. More recently, it was a s, and not a th. But in modern Hebrew, we will always pronounce this as Ruth, Ruth, and that means Ruth.
Then how is if there's no the sound in modern Hebrew, how is Bethel pronounced?
So Bethel in modern Hebrew would be Bet El. But I thought you were going to ask a different question. It was a good question either way. So in modern Hebrew, you'd say Bet El, you wouldn't say Bethel, and you say Bet Lechem, and you wouldn't say Bethlehem. But I thought you were going to ask, so what happens if you need to have a th sound, like if your name is, Thelonious or something, how do you do it? Or if your name is Beth and you want to be able to tell someone your name is Beth, then there are ways of making a th sound in Hebrew by writing things. We put a chipchik on here, and then you'd get to see, you know that it's a th instead of a t there. But I saw a joke this week. The joke was, what did you call Boaz before he met Ruth? You called him ruthless. Okay, you're welcome. Sorry about that. All right, now we have this name, Sarah, which some people will say is Sarah, but you may wonder why Sarah is often spelled with an H at the end in English, and that's because there's a hey at the end. And you will have noticed that the hey at the end is silent. It's coming at the end of the vowel. It's really a part of that vowel, Sarah. I would say that the vowel is this whole thing. This is a vowel all by itself, but this whole thing is a vowel. They sound exactly the same. But if you had to ask me what the vowel was, I'd have to tell you that. And then we have conjugating some verbs here. And we have the verb about hearing. And this is, we probably should be looking at the text too and seeing about how we conjugate verbs and what's going on here. So maybe we're going to zoom back, because what we're doing here is we're looking at, we've already seen these verbs in their masculine singular form. And today we've learned some feminine singular nouns and names, and we're learning how to use verbs with them. So let's take a look again at these things. Let's do a quick review. We learned of. Don't ask me why we didn't learn mother. I have no idea why they didn't do that. We have el, which is to or toward. Isha is woman. Behema is a cow, cattle, animal. Bat is daughter. He is she. We have a new verb, halach. We have Yerushalayim, which is a city name. We have min, which means from, it's a preposition. So we have 2 prepositions now. We have min, and we have el from the beginning up here. So those are 2 prepositions, and they're standalones, which means they're separate words. Obviously, there's a reason why I keep saying that, but you don't know what that is yet. And then we have Mitzrayim, which is Egypt. It's another city name, a place name. It's not a city, it's a country. And then we have Mishpacha, which is family. Na'ara, which is a young woman. We have Ruth, which is Ruth, it's her name. Sarah is Sarah, it's a name. And then we have these conjugated forms of the verbs. So what we're supposed to be learning today, the name of the chapter is feminine singular nouns. So I wanted to show you these words. I don't want to get them too small. I want to show you these words, and I want you to notice some things about feminine nouns. So we have Isha, which is woman. Behema, which is cow. We have, keep going down. We have Mishpacha, Na'ara. Those are all singular feminine nouns. And the way we can tell that those are feminine is because they end in ah. So Na'ara mishpacha, isha, and behema are all feminine because they end in a. So one of the ways that you can always tell that something is feminine, and when I say always, I mean more than 90% of the time, is if whatever this word is, and I'm just going to make a squiggly thing, whatever the word is, if it ends in that consonant, that vowel is called a kamatz. You don't have to know that, but I'm just going to tell you. If it ends in kamatz hey, whatever the word is, la la la. If it ends in kamatz hey, then the word is feminine, 90-something% of the time. So these words like isha and behema, and moving down, I got to change my pointer thingy here, otherwise I can't move down while I'm still in a pen mode. Mishpacha and na'ara, Sarah, those are all feminine singular nouns. The other way of telling that something is feminine, another way, is if it ends in whatever the word is. I'm going to make another squiggly thing here. If it ends in a tav, which is similar to other languages like French, you'll see an et ending or something. But if it ends in a tav, then you know it's feminine. So for example, bat ends in a tav, so it's feminine. In fact, the word Shabbat ends in a tav and it's feminine. The name Ruth ends in a tav and it's feminine. So we now have words that end in a and words that end in tav. And we have one other thing, we have two other ways today of knowing that something is feminine. If it's a woman's name, although they happen to follow in those two categories, like Ruth and Sarah, those are feminine names because they're names for women. So Ruth and Sarah are feminine names. It happens that Ruth ends with a tav, and it happens that Sarah ends with a kamatz hey. That's awesome. But the other two words that we have that are feminine, which shock many people, are Yerushalayim and Mitzrayim. And Yerushalayim and Mitzrayim are feminine because they're places. And most places, again, more than 90% of them are feminine, just because. It's like, why do people call their boats feminine? I have no idea. Habit. I have time. I mean, there are funny reasons why. Although I have a Marine here, so maybe you know why. Why is the ship always feminine? It's a good thing you're muted. But anyway, cities are always feminine. And by always, I mean vast.
I don't know why ships are always referred to as she. I do know, or I learned a new definition of marine here recently. My northbound end of a southbound mule rides in Navy equipment.
Oh man, ouch. Ouch, ouch. Yerushalayim and Mitzrayim are feminine. And so it's important to know if something's masculine or feminine because Hebrew is a gender-based language, and the adjectives, the verbs are all going to have to agree with the noun itself. And I'm going to say this many times, although so far all we know are singular nouns. I'm going to tell you that the way to tell if a noun is masculine or feminine is to always, and you don't have to worry about plurals yet, but always look at the singular. And the vast majority of time, which means again, more than 90% of the time, actually, I would say probably more like 95% of the time at least, the nouns will follow these rules, that it will either be, and there's one more category, but it will either end in a or end in tav, or it will be a place or a paired body part. Most of the paired body parts like ayin, einayim, eyes and ears and hands, those are paired body parts. Most of the paired body parts are feminine. So those are just categories that are going to be feminine. And I say 95 at least % of the time because there are some exceptions. I mean, I can give you a very common exception to the rule about ending in an a, that if you took the Aleph Bet class with me, then you know that the word for night is Lila, and Lila ends in a, and it's masculine. Or the most glaring, horrible, which we don't have yet. We haven't learned this one yet in today's class, in the biblical Hebrew class. But one of the most common pronouns, more common than he and she, is you, masculine singular, in prayer book and in And possibly in biblical Hebrew, and maybe third person is more popular, but to say you, like every time you start a blessing and you say Baruch Atah, the word Atah is you, and it's masculine or mixed singular, and it ends in ah, as if it were feminine, and it's not officially feminine, so it's officially not feminine. So there are some very glaring anomalies or that fit those categories, like end in ah, that are not feminine, but you can 99% of the time, I'm going to say you can guess and be right. Yep, Lexi.
With the Baruch Atah referring to God, I don't remember correctly. Since that is referring to God's spiritual side, that automatically makes that feminine.
Nope, it's specifically referring to God as a you, as a masculine singular. And we can talk about that soon. We didn't learn the word atah yet. I was just giving you an example that I think that you've heard of that ends in ah, but is masculine. But no, it's not. It could confuse you like that, thinking that it's God's spiritual sense, but it could, and I think you deserve to be fluid, for lack of another word, to be able to say that I think in the very beginning of the Torah, it gives us reason to think that God has many aspects, that some of God's aspects are masculine and some are feminine. But when it is saying Baruch Atah, it is specifically referring to God in the masculine. And I can tell you that, and I have a way of showing that there are other aspects to God even built in there, but that's beside the point. But the fact that it says Baruch Atah, Baruch is an adjective, and Baruch is masculine and singular too. And the nouns may try to trick you. You may see a word like Lila, and Lila means night, and Lila may look feminine, and it may try to trick you into thinking that it's feminine. But if I want to say good night, if I do, I think mom's going to fall asleep. But if I want to say good night, I say Lila Tov. I'm not going to say Lila Tova ever. It would be wrong. Lila Tov. Tov is an adjective. Tov is masculine and singular, and that's going to never lie. So Baruch Atah, the Baruch is an adjective form, and it's going to say praised are you, and the Baruch is masculine and singular. So where we know that in this case, the Atah very specifically is referring to masculine singular. Like I say, one of these days we can have the theological, grammatical, linguistic tap dance out of there. But for now, I'm going to leave it at that, because all we know right now are masculine singular and feminine singular, and we're going to leave it at that for this book and this work. So the next thing that we're supposed to
I look forward to the tap dance.
It's really fun. I love this. My tap dances are better than most tap dances when it comes to these things. So the vocabulary that we have so far, where we have masculine singular nouns like davar, and we have feminine singular nouns like mishpacha. And there's nothing necessarily gender about these nouns. It doesn't mean that a thing or a word is specifically masculine and a family is specifically feminine. There's nothing gender specific about those things. It is truly just a grammatical concept. It is not, there's nothing feminine about feminine nouns for the most part. Mishpacha is just a noun. It happens to follow the rules of and that's true of femininity. That's true for most of the languages that are gender-based. So if I were speaking about a table in tavola, in one language it's feminine, and in Hebrew it's masculine, and it's not like it's a battle that in Hebrew tables are more masculine or manly than they are in Italian. It doesn't mean that at all. It's just the way that it's going to work with the grammar. So I already told you those.
So it would just default, by default, it's always masculine, or that the table, for example, by default, that one is always masculine, irregardless of how it will be.
No, the word in Hebrew, shulchan, is masculine It doesn't end in a, it doesn't end in tav, and it acts masculine. In other words, it's got masculine adjectives and masculine verbs. And so it is how it's spelled and how it's pronounced. It's going to follow the grammar rules of something that's masculine, and it fits all the grammar rules for something that's masculine. So it's not bending any rules or anything, but I'm saying that in another language, table is feminine. So there's nothing specifically feminine or masculine about a table. It's not that, you know, this one is curvier and that's why they make it feminine in another language. It has nothing to do with it. It is totally regardless of anything gender specific other than the grammar of it. And you'll see, the more you're using your Hebrew, the better you'll get at this. You'll, you know,
So basically, this one boils down to just the grammar rules of that particular language or dialect.
Yep, what it is in that language. So that's where we are. And that's what it is for all the gender. I mean, we can create some kind of a story if we want. We can say, for example, in the second sentence in Torah, where it says that the Spirit of God is hovering on the face of the waters, I can look at the word for spirit and I could say the word is ruach. Ruach happens to be a word that can either be masculine or feminine, depending on how it's used. And in this case, in this story, it is used as a feminine word. And I know that because of the verb that goes with it. And so you say, that's interesting. Why is spirit here feminine, whereas other places it's masculine? Why? And so you could create a story around it, but it's not, but we may be making it up. It may not be there at all. But we make up stories about these things sometimes. All right, let's keep going. I wanted to show you about verbs. We've already learned some verbs. And if you need me to, hold on, I think I can pull this and show you some verbs. We have these flashcards, and we have verbs like zachar is remembered, and malach is ruled or reigned, and amad is stood, and shama is heard, and shamar is guarded. And all these were masculine singular. So if I wanted to say he stood, I would say hu, which is he, amad, or I would say hamelech amad, the king stood, but that's because my subject is masculine and singular, and I would use this form, the ye verb form, that's third person, which means he, masculine, singular, and that's that form. If now that we're throwing in some feminine singular nouns, the verbs are going to change from what we saw to things like, instead of shama, it's going to be shama'a. Instead of shamar for he did it, it's going to be shamra. So if I want to say, for example, Abraham, shamar, he guarded. If I want to say Sarah did it, I can't say Sarah shamar. That would be inappropriate because that's a masculine singular verb. I'd have to say Sarah shamra. So essentially what we're doing is we're taking the consonants from the he did it form, like this, the he did it form, and I'm doing this to it. I'm going to show you. I'll draw a little bit on here. I'm going to turn this into that, and I'm adding this. That's a very giant kamatz hey, but I'm adding this. Let's make that a hey. So I'm taking shama, I'm changing this vowel into this, and then I am adding a kamatz hey. I am changing this vowel to this, and I'm making this be a kamatz hey. And that's what I'm going to do to all of these verbs that we have to make them feminine. So if I wanted to say Sarah stood, I would say Sarah amada, and I'd use this spelling. If I want to say Sarah heard, I'd say Sarah sham'a. If I want to say Sarah guarded, I'd say Sarah shamra, and I would just change the vowels to that. Or more appropriately, because you're not going to be writing these sentences on your own, you're going to be seeing a sentence and figuring out what it means. If you see sham'a, then you know that it means that the subject has to be feminine and singular. If you see shamra, then you know the subject has to be feminine and singular. If you see zachra, it means the subject has to be feminine and singular. If you see amda, then she stood, it has to be feminine and singular. Then we get to these. These two are a little bit confusing, and I'll show you why. And I warned you about these already, that the singular forms look like, let's show you. The singular form looked like this, malach, and it has a final chaf here because there's only 3 root letters and the chaf is in the final position. So it has to be a final chaf there. But when I shift it to be in the middle, because I'm adding an a, it has to turn into not a final chaf, it has to turn into a middle of the word chaf, a regular chaf. So you have to recognize that malcha is the feminine form of malach. And you have to recognize that halacha is the feminine form of, and we had it here, whoop, I went too far, halach. So don't get used to the shape of the letter, just get used to which letter it is. The chaf and the final chaf are the same letter, it just depends on where it is in the word. Make sense? A little bit. So most of the time you're going to be seeing it in the direction of seeing a verb and then trying to figure out if it's masculine or feminine. That's really easy to do. In the third person, in the past, if what you see is a verb and it ends in ah, it's feminine. Ah, that's a feminine ending. And that's what it's going to do. It's going to end in ah. If what you see are the same 3 root letters and it doesn't end in ah, and it's going to have a yay verb pattern, then you know that it's a masculine singular. And I want you to start trying to look for the root letters. You'll know that the ah ending is one that's just going to show that it's feminine. You need to be able to strip it down to the 3 root letters. So the 3 root letters of amda are ayin mem dalet, and the 3 root letters of zachra are zayin kaf resh. And it doesn't matter that it has an ah ending or it doesn't have an ah ending. You have to know that it has to do with remembering and stood and went and ruled. You have to remember that these are past tense verbs and they're singular. We also have a few other concepts here. One of them is, how do you say and? How do you say and in Hebrew? And the word for and in Hebrew is not a separate word. We're going to take, I'm going to change my color here. Let's go to something else. If I have a noun and I want to say and, so I want to say and a father, I add v to the beginning of the word. If I want to say and a woman, I would say v isha. I bet I could scroll down and see if it would work to keep them on. Like leave those there and scroll down. Maybe I can add v to other things. I could do some of these. I can't do all of these. Yeah, well, that was cute, but it didn't work. So if I want to say and went, I would say v'halach. I can add the v to verbs and I can add the v to nouns, and I would get that. So that's how you say and, you add it directly to the word. Yes, Lex.
So in Hebrew, it would still only be 2 words. Compared to English, it would be word and word.
So
in other words, it will be 2
it's,
words in Hebrew.
In
Hebrew, it will be 2 words. English, it will be 3.
No, I wouldn't see it that way, but maybe that's how you want to see it. If I want to say a man and a woman, I would say ish v'isha. So if that's what you mean by 2 words, it looks like 2 words because the and is prefixed. It's directly squished onto the second word. And if in English to translate ish v'isha would be man and woman, or more appropriately in English, it would be a man and a woman. That's 5 words for the price of 2. In Hebrew, you'll see 2 things. You'll see ish.
So basically, in Hebrew, it will be written as 2 words.
For the, and it's funny that you say that, because in Hebrew, what I see is v halach. I see 1 word. I'm not seeing the word before it. I'm seeing that the thing that I'm saying and about gets a v attached to it, and I don't even see the thing before it anymore. So I see where you're going with that. Is that you're seeing both of it, or however many words it is. But in order to be able to say and in Hebrew, this is the important part. In order to say and, I'm going to take the v and I'm going to squish it directly onto the word. That's how you do it in Hebrew. And you're only going to see 1 word. You're not going to see more than 1 word there. In English, it may wind up translating to 3 words, because you may say and a woman, let's say. Does that make sense?
In other words, man and woman, it just becomes, to directly translate it, it will be man, woman, with the extra letter switched on to woman, but you still know that is talking about 2 separate things.
No, I would still say v means and. I wouldn't take that away. I would say v, which is its own. I mean, so I mean, part of what's hard here is I don't have the text to show you these words. Let me see if I've got something that will show you. Hold on. I may have something that's matching. That's okay. Maybe here. This. Here's some sentences. Okay, some real life sentences. This is a review for chapters 4 through 8. So this is Avraham, which is Abraham, right? Amad, stood. I'm going to make this bigger, sorry. A little bit bigger, a little bit bigger. All right. Avraham, that's Abraham, right? Amad, he stood. Vehu, and he, shamar mishpacha. Abraham stood and he guarded a family. Now, the number of words that it translates to in English is a little bit irrelevant to what the Hebrew is, but the point is that where it says vahu, that means and he. I'm not sure that that's what you were trying to say. I think that that's close. Okay, vahu means and he. Avraham amad, Abraham stood, vahu, and he guarded mishpacha. So what we're seeing here is Abraham is the noun. He's the subject. It's a pronoun, but he's a subject, and it's a proper noun, I should say. He's the subject, and we're showing 2 verbs that he did. He stood, and he guarded a family. So the and is going to be directly on there. Let me give you another example, but these are not words that you know.
We got it.
It says
We got it.
You got what? You understand about the and?
Yes, we got it.
So the other thing that I have to show you is that occasionally, and the v changes its vowels. And it changes its vowels for very regular reasons, but you still have to recognize what's going on. And I'm not going to show you the regular reasons, although it's in your book. And I found where it is in the back of the book, because people have been asking me, and I kept forgetting to post it, but it's in the book. But for example, and this is not a word that you know yet, anachnu means we. We haven't learned all those pronouns yet. It's coming very soon. Anachnu means we. But the v has to turn into this vowel. It has to do with what the next letter is. But if you see va anachnu, you're going to recognize the word anachnu, we, and you're going to know that va at the beginning of a word means and. And so you're going to have to know that this vowel changed, but that doesn't scare you away from the fact that you know that this means and we. And there are a few different ways that the v at the beginning of the word, this is the most common way of prefixing a word to mean and. There are a few other ways that the v changes. And the key here is just know, and I'm showing you, like we've got v, we've got v, we've got v, we've got v. I mean, it really is the most common way of doing it, but every once in a while, it's even going to change to be oo. When it changes to be oo, it is the only time that you can ever start a word with a vowel and not with a consonant. And there's a very specific rule about when it changes to an oo. And I don't want to mess up the waters right now by teaching you the very specific rule. I really want to, as of today, just show that it's either going to be a v, it may change the vowel, it's going to be an u, and both of those things mean and they're at the beginning of words. It's going to be prefixed directly to the beginning of the word. And as you do the exercises, it will be easier for you to see them. Once you see examples of it, it's going to be a lot easier for you to understand what we're saying here. Because you're not going to see other things that are going to be prefixed. You know, it's not going to be a vav that's at the beginning of a word. It's going to mean something else. Most of the time, it's just going to be this. So
You've confused me and given me clarity theoretically on both ends at the same time.
I know. And part of the problem is if nobody has, I did not anticipate that no one was going to have their book in front of them for today. And I should have had a copy of this chapter so that we could be seeing it in its delightful English presentation. And we don't have that.
Hey, my brain's not hurting at the moment.
I know, pretty cool. I'm going slowly and gently for you. And you still have noises coming from you from all sides. There's supposed to be two other things that get thrown at you for this chapter. One is that the word who or the word he, which we saw means he or she, right? The word who and he also mean it. There are going to be times when you're going to see that as it. That's one of the things. And the other thing is the word mean is sometimes it's going to stand by itself, but sometimes it becomes kind of a contraction. And so when it becomes a contraction, I'm going to show it to you from, if I want to say, for example, he comes from Egypt, or he went to Egypt. Hu halach, no, he went from Egypt. That doesn't make sense. He went from Egypt to Jerusalem. We could do that. Hu halach min Mitzrayim El Yerushalayim. He went from Egypt to Jerusalem. But every once in a while, you're also going to see it not as a standalone word, but you're going to see it as a contraction. And when it becomes a contraction, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see the me with the mem and the one dot. You're not going to see the nun. The nun is going to drop out. And what's going to happen instead of the nun is a dagesh. I call it the tombstone dagesh. So if I want to say from Egypt, for example, and I wanted to say it as one word, or if you saw it and it were only one word, you'd see it like this, mi Mitzrayim, and it's going to look like one big happy word, but in English, you're going to translate it as from Egypt, as if it were two separate words. And those are two options of ways of saying from Egypt is either keeping this min as a separate, I'm going to leave it, take all of that away, either min as a separate word or mi with the nun dropping out and the mi prefixed directly to a word with a dagesh in there. So those are things that you're going to see. And there's sometimes vowel changes there also, but pretty soon I think we're ready for the big vowel reveal and everything you ever wanted to know about vowels, but we're afraid to ask. I told you, now that you know the word mishpacha, I feel really good about teaching you about vowels. And that is the end of this class. I'm going to stop the share and I'm going to stop the recording.